Thank you, conference. You know, for me, taking on this job as Foreign Secretary and our mission for a global Britain is the fulfillment of a long-standing dream. 15 years ago, I was a young Foreign Office lawyer. I was posted out to The Hague. And you know, I used to have diplomats from Asia to South America. They'd come up to me and they'd say, "You guys in the EU spend so much time talking to yourselves. You miss so much of what's going on in the rest of the world." You know, it was true then and it's true today. Brussels isn't the only game in town. Everywhere I go as Foreign Secretary, people are fired up by our vision for a global Britain. When I visited the US, President Trump invited me into the Oval Office to tell me just how much he loves our country and how much he admires our Prime Minister. When I visited Bangkok for the ASEAN meeting of Asia-Pacific nations, they embraced our role in their region because they prize our commitment to the rules-based international system. In Mexico, we talked about climate change. In Canada, we talked about our joint campaign to protect journalists around the world from torture and arbitrary detention. Truth is, we Brits get a very warm welcome almost everywhere in the world. Okay, maybe not in Luxembourg. But you know what? I think the British people have had more than enough of EU leaders disrespecting British Prime Ministers. So we'll strive in good faith for a good deal. But if the EU spurn the opportunity for a win-win deal, we will leave at the end of October. No ifs, no buts. Now, I hope we can stay good European neighbours and friends, but we'll be free to chart our own course as masters of our own destiny at home and abroad, with a much more liberal and energetic approach to free trade, as Liz Truss has just been talking about. But our vision of global Britain also reaches well beyond trade. And when I was posted to The Hague back in 2003, I headed up the Foreign Office's war crimes team. And I can tell you, experiences like that stay with you. I visited Sierra Leone and I met the victims of that terrible conflict. And I came across this one boy who told me how a rebel soldier had asked whether he wanted a long or a short sleeve before deciding where to wield his machete on his arm. That was a really heartbreaking story to listen to. But you know what? I'm proud that Britain helped Sierra Leone get back on its feet. I'm proud to have been part of the UK's international effort to bring the perpetrators of those crimes to justice. So as we look to our future, I think our foreign policy should be guided by a clear moral compass. We've got to offer the poorest countries the chance to trade with us, freed from the shackles of hypocritical EU protectionism. We've got to lead when it comes to tackling climate change. That's why we're hosting COP26, which is the global conference on climate change, over in Glasgow next year. And we've got to offer the downtrodden around the world the hope that comes with standing up for the basic freedoms that we cherish here in Manchester this week, in this very conference centre. You know, I think sometimes it feels like a hopeless task. But history remembers the courage of those who stand up to be counted. You know, back in the 1990s, I met a Russian dissident called Natan Sharansky. He'd been locked in a Soviet gulag for 9 years because he was campaigning for the rights of oppressed Jews to leave Russia. Now, I still find it almost impossible to imagine. I mean, just think about it for a moment. 9 years in a Soviet jail. Think about those miserable conditions, being separated from your loved ones. I asked Sharansky what kept his hopes alive during all that long time, locked up alone. And he told me that the political prisoners had a secret way of communicating in the gulag. They tapped on the walls in code to spread the word. So when in 1983 Ronald Reagan stood up and called out the Soviet Union as an evil empire, those prisoners came alive with a hum of jailed dissidents tapping and whispering from cell to cell. And Reagan's courage and moral clarity gave hope to those who feared they'd been forgotten. And Sharansky was the first political prisoner released by Mikhail Gorbachev. Now, I know the world is a very different place today, but we must never forget the lessons of history. And we must keep the flame of freedom alive in the darkest corner of the bleakest jails. For those struggling for the basic liberties we take for granted, the rights you jealously guard here this week to debate, to have your say, to hold your politicians to account. So we won't look the other way when the people of Hong Kong are beaten on commuter trains for exercising their right to peaceful protest. We won't stand idly by whilst journalists are jailed or tortured or beaten up for criticizing the despotic regime of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And conference, we will never rest until all those bearing UK nationality detained on a cruel whim in Iran are free to rejoin their loved ones at home. No, that's not our way. We'll relish, not shrink, from our duty to take a leading role in bringing the perpetrators of the worst injustices to account. Whether it's ensuring the release of the 2 Reuters journalists jailed in Myanmar just for reporting on the plight of the Rohingya refugees, or bringing war criminals to justice from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And when we leave the EU, we're going to be able to do even more. So, conference, I can tell you today that when we leave the EU, we're going to bring into force a UK Magnitsky law to put visa bans and asset freezes on those individuals deemed responsible for serious human rights abuses like torture. Because the British people don't want those with blood on their hands doing their Christmas shopping down in Knightsbridge. They don't want their dirty money laundered through British banks. And because our vision of a truly global Britain means being a force for good in the world, a good global citizen. And you know, conference, when I think about some of the challenges we face in the world and how hard some of those people have it abroad, and I think of the fate of those living under oppression, it reminds me just how lucky we are, just how much we prize our hard-earned prosperity and our hard-won freedoms here in this country. And we must never take those for granted. And that's what's at stake if Labour takes office under Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour Party, once a mainstream party, now hails the failed socialist experiment in Venezuela, where the population starves and dissidents are shot in the street. A party that chooses to believe the Kremlin over its own intelligence agencies when Putin's assassins poison people on the streets of Salisbury. And a party led by a man in Jeremy Corbyn who attends a memorial at the graves of terrorists responsible for butchering Israeli Olympic athletes out of anti-Semitic hate. I say this, and I say it to all of you, you know I'm a passionate Brexiteer. There are some things even bigger than Brexit. And keeping that lot out of Downing Street is one of them. So, to any of our colleagues or former colleagues who may just be tempted to put Jeremy Corbyn and that momentum mob into number 10 as part of some kind of temporary anti-Brexit coalition, I just say this: history would never forgive you. And as for the Liberal Democrats, they want to scrap the result of the 2016 vote. You can't call yourself a Democrat. Put it in the name of your party and then try to cancel a referendum. No one ever accused the Lib Dems of consistency. But when it comes to offences under the Trade Description Act, they are guilty as charged. This Prime Minister's got a better way to take us forward. Let's get Brexit done. Let's move on. Let's unite behind that one nation vision for our country, and let's bring the Conservative family back together. You know, we in the Conservatives, we keep our promises. So we're going to make a success of Brexit. We're going to free our country to reach its full potential. And with this Prime Minister's leadership, with his energy, we're going to seize the historic opportunity for Britain to reach out to the world on our own terms, with global horizons, limitless ambition, and a strong moral compass. My friends, it's time to put the past behind us. It's time to let go of the wrangling and the doubts. It's time for us to be the country we want to be. Great Britain, ambitious, confident, and free. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your panel chair, Diya Chakravarti.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this session and a good afternoon to you all. This session, as you know, is getting Brexit done and about what the government is doing to get Brexit done, delivering Brexit. On the panel, we have three of the most senior members of the government who are intimately involved in designing and implementing the government's Brexit strategy. So if anybody can tell us what the government is doing to deliver Brexit, it will be them. So it's a great opportunity to have them here. I didn't hear that, but hold on to that. Perhaps we'll come back to you later after we've listened to these guys. You know them all, so I'm not going to waste any time introducing them to you. We're just going to go straight to the speeches. The way it's going to work is we're going to have the first speaker, which is going to be Michael. Then we're going to have some questions, which I have on this iPad. Hopefully you've all been sending your questions in. Then we're going to move on to Jacob. We're going to have some more questions, and then on to Steve ultimately. So, without further ado, please may I ask the Right Honourable Michael Gove to present, to address us.
Thank you very much, dear. These are testing times for our party and for our country. A paralysed parliament, a polarised politics, and urgent reforms that this country needs put on pause. And all because the referendum vote has not been honoured and Brexit has not been delivered. $17.4 million people voted to leave the European Union in June 2016, more than have ever voted for any party or any policy in our country's history. But 3 years on, that democratic verdict has not been honoured. We cannot allow this division and delay to continue. We must get Brexit done. And the only party leader determined to secure a good deal for Britain and to get Brexit done is our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Now, I've known Boris for more than 30 years, and while we haven't always agreed on everything, let me tell you this. Boris is brave, he is determined, he loves this country, and he delivers. And that's because Boris is an optimist. He believes in the power of the British people to change the world for the better. And that optimism has allowed him to overcome big challenges before. Throughout his career of public service, people have told him, it just can't be done. You can't possibly beat Ken Livingstone in London to become the mayor. You can't possibly get re-elected in a Labour city with a Conservative government in Westminster. You can't possibly get new bikes on our roads, new buses on our streets, keep fares down, keep the economy growing, cut crime, get investment for new schools, and deliver the world's best ever Olympics, and lift thousands out of poverty. But again and again, Boris has delivered. As he did when we led the Vote Leave campaign. People said we'd never win. The odds were against us. The establishment was against us. Even Nigel Faraj was against us. But Vote Leave won. Because our message then, like our Prime Minister today, was optimistic, forward-looking, and freedom-loving. And that's why I trust Boris to do what we've waited too long to do. Get a great deal, get Brexit done, and allow us to get on with what really matters. Investing in our precious NHS, supporting teachers in our great state schools, and backing our brave police in the fight against crime. These are the people's priorities. They are our priorities. And that is why now we are the real People's Party. And of course, while we're optimistic about our future, we're also realistic about some of the challenges immediately ahead. In getting Brexit done, we will have to show resolution. We have to negotiate hard to get the right Brexit deal. And if we don't get a deal by October the 31st, then we will have to leave without a deal. We simply cannot allow this process to drag on indefinitely. Now, I don't deny that leaving without a deal will, initially, mean that there are some challenges. The EU plans to impose new tariffs, new checks on trade, and it isn't showing the same generosity to UK nationals as we're showing to EU nationals. But we will stay open for trade, open for business, and determined to respect the rights of all EU citizens in this country. And we've taken huge steps to get ready. We're investing in new customs procedures to smooth trade, we're supporting business to adapt to new rules, and we're standing up for our citizens abroad. The level of our preparations has accelerated massively since Boris became Prime Minister. Now, of course, we can't anticipate every risk, we can't guarantee against some turbulence. And that's why I would much prefer us to secure a deal with the EU before October the 31st. After all, it's in their interests as well as ours. But if we can't, then leave we must. Because while the difficulties caused by leaving without a deal will pass, the damage to our democracy in not getting Brexit done would endure and resound for much longer. Our democracy is precious. And it depends on people trusting us as politicians when we say that we will put our trust in them. On the eve of the referendum result in 2016, it was the late Paddy Ashdown who actually got to the heart of it. He said, "I will forgive no one who does not accept the sovereign voice of the British people once it has spoken. When democracy speaks, we obey." When democracy speaks, we, the politicians, obey. That's the position of a true liberal and a true Democrat. but it is not the position of the party that today calls itself the Liberal Democrats. They refuse to accept the sovereign voice of the British people. They have worked constantly to delay, dilute, and deny Brexit. And now they want to cancel Brexit altogether. Telling the public that they won't be listened to until they agree with Guy Verhofstadt isn't liberal or democratic. It's patronising, condescending, we know best, get back in line and know your place arrogance of the kind that makes Marie Antoinette seem like a model of grounded humility. Voting Liberal Democrat doesn't get Brexit done, but it does risk something else. Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn. Voting for any party other than the Conservatives risks letting Labour into power and Corbyn into Downing Street. And Labour in government wouldn't get Brexit done. They want to prolong our membership of the EU, negotiate for many months more with Brussels, then agree a deal, but only on the EU's terms, and then hold another referendum in which they would be prepared to say that we should stay in the EU forever. When we should be getting on with improving education, strengthening the NHS and fighting crime and creating jobs, Labour would be getting on with what it does best, showing weakness abroad, sowing division at home, and tearing itself and the country apart. You simply need to look at Jeremy Corbyn's record. How can we let a man who supported Sinn Féin IRA be in charge of our nation's security? How can we let a man who thinks that we shouldn't have immigration controls be in charge of our borders? How can we let a man who thinks we should punish companies for being successful be in charge of our economy? And how on earth can we let a man who's indulged, accommodated, and excused the most terrible anti-Semitism be in charge of our democracy? Soft on terrorism, supine on security, bankrupt economically, and a danger to minorities, Jeremy Corbyn is totally unfit to be Prime Minister of our country. Yes, these are testing times. But when our party and our country have been tested in the past, we have met and mastered the challenges of our times. Conservatives rose to the challenge of the Industrial Revolution with the courage to cut tariffs and with the compassion to pass laws to protect factory workers. Conservatives responded to the turbulence of the 1930s with investment in health and housing for the poorest and the resolution to rearm in the face of dictatorships. Conservatives also reversed the decline of our nation in the 1980s by spreading wealth, extending home ownership, increasing educational opportunity, and facing down Marxism at home and abroad. And of course, after the great crash of 2008, it was Conservative leadership that repaired our economy, reformed our schools, helped millions into work, put rehabilitation at the heart of justice, fought climate change, enhanced our environment, and held the light of liberty aloft while freedom came under attack across the globe. Now we have the chance, this generation of Conservatives, to embrace a new decade of renewal, to make our country the best in the world for education and science, the best in the world when it comes to using technology to banish hunger, fight climate change, and end poverty, the most civilized, tolerant, and welcoming home to people of all backgrounds, the most creative, imaginative, and entrepreneurial place on earth, a nation renewed and a mission to lead the world. That is our challenge and our calling. Let us be worthy of it, together.
Thank you very much, Michael. Moving on to a couple of questions now. The first question, with the most number of upticks, if you like, is will we deliver Brexit by the 31st of October? But I have a feeling if I put that to the three of you, you're all going to give a monosyllabic answer. So let's try and move on from that one. The next one is, how will we stop the hopeless government of national disunity, as people seem to call it, from taking over number 10? To all three of you, do you want to start, Steve?
Well, you don't unite the country by denying democracy and ignoring the biggest vote in our history. It is not unity to have a government formed by just one side of the argument. And the biggest issue in terms of the rise of populism is parties that don't respect democratic decisions. So that is why we will be out on the 31st of October, because we are a party that will always trust the people and deliver on their vote.
Well, the problem with the initials Government of National Unity is it makes a GNU. And some of you will remember Flanders and Swan, the nicest work of nature in the zoo. And it seems to me that is an appropriate place for a GNU, not 10 Downing Street. And it is, of course, as Steve was intimating, actually, not unity at all. It's a Ramona coup, isn't it? It's to try and frustrate and stop what 17.4 million people voted for. And the comeuppance they will get, if they defy the electorate, will come in the ballot box when we come to a general election. So fear nothing that they try to do, fear nothing of their schemes and their stratagems, because ultimately we will have a general election. And parties that deny democracy get into great trouble when people have the chance to vote. And I would have thought the Liberal Democrats, after their experience of coalition, would be wary of going into coalition with Jeremy Corbyn. The last 2 times they tried it, they got wiped out in ensuing general elections. How sad that would be.
I'm in favour of a government of national unity. Do you know how we get it? We have a general election. We put to the people the essential question, who should govern our country? I'm confident what the response will be. Boris Johnson re-elected, a Conservative majority, our country unified, Brexit done, and are concentrating on what we need to do as a government, which is making sure that this country can be the best in the world.
The next most popular question is what progress is being made in the Brexit talks? And if I may please add a sort of supplementary onto that. Given that the Prime Minister has said today that it will not, when we see a deal, it's not going to be a return to Mrs. May's deal, how confident are you that it's actually going to be a substantially different deal? Perhaps we should start with Michael.
Well, Steve is in the lead in these negotiations, and Steve and Boris and Dominic Rabb have secured big changes in what the EU have said that they would be prepared to do. Before Boris became Prime Minister, before Steve started these negotiations intensively in the last couple of months, the EU said the withdrawal agreement was sacrosanct, it couldn't be changed. Now they're saying it can be changed. And they also said that the backstop was inviolable. That was the only way to make sure that we had an answer for the challenges on the island of Ireland. But now they're saying, actually, the backstop can be replaced. They're not emotionally attached to it. So those are significant gains, and they're down to the fact that Boris has given us clear leadership on this issue, and that Steve, Dominic, and their respective teams have been engaging with EU leaders to make them appreciate how important it is to get a deal that will pass the House of Commons.
Jacob?
I'm going to defer to Michael and Steve because it's their area of expertise. I have the comparatively easy task, along with the Chief Whip, of trying to get what they agree through the House of Commons.
And there's a question, there's a question with your name written on. You just wait, Jacob. But Steve, yes, it is, of course, your department.
Well, what links those two answers is the deal has to be one that will pass Parliament, and we know that Parliament has rejected the backstop, and that is why the backstop has to go. Because it is at odds with our tradition as a Conservative and Unionist party. It is at odds with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which is built on the consent of both communities. And because it would involve laws applying in Northern Ireland over which people will not have a say. And now when I travel across European capitals, the very clear message that comes from those capitals is they want a deal. Both sides recognise a deal is the best outcome. But we've been very clear, and the Prime Minister has been very clear throughout the summer, well, come what may, we are leaving, because that is what democracy in this country requires.
Thank you. I think with that, we can move on to our second speaker. And please, Jacob, the Right Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg MP, the Leader of the House of Commons.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. There seems to be some enthusiasm in this hall for getting Brexit done. And I didn't realise there were so many members of the North East Somerset Conservative Association here, with whom I always had a little deal at fringe events, which was that if I needed a little bit of extra applause, I'll tug on my earlobe. So you're now let into the secret. But it's an extraordinary honour for me to be here speaking at this conference. Because like so many of you, I belonged to this party since I was a mere youth. And I'm sorry to confess I was once a mere youth. I've sat like you in the seats in the days when conferences were held at the seaside. And I cannot tell you how pleased I am that you, the members, are once again the focus of these sessions. It was here, thank you, somebody agrees with me. Thank you. It was here in Manchester that Disraeli captured the essence of conservative principles in his 1872 speech at the Free Trade Hall, which lasted, out of interest, for over 4 hours. Don't worry. When he set out our priorities for the Constitution and for the condition of the people, especially their health, he also noted that the audience he was addressing was of the highest intelligence, but not one that could compete with the brilliance, the luminosity of the audience in front of me today. We are better than Disraeli's audience. And he knew that the Conservative Party is a grassroots party. You, ladies and gentlemen, are the source of all our energy and intellectual nutrition. And it is right that you, the members, are back at the heart of our conference. And we owe you a debt of gratitude, an enormous debt, for your robustness and resolve now that the constitutional storm clouds muster over this nation. We feel a bit like Gulliver, tied down at Lilliput, tied down by a ragtag, motley collection of feeble, footling, feckless politicians, all in desperate pursuit of a single unworthy aim, to renege on the solemn promise they made to the British people and to try to cancel the largest single democratic mandate in our history. On the left, not you, ladies and gentlemen, on the left, we have Jeremy Corbyn, self-avowed Marxist, arguably the most left-wing leader the Labour Party has ever had, who has achieved the most remarkable feat of being even more unpopular on his side than on ours. Now, I never thought I'd get such applause for Jeremy Corbyn at a Tory party conference. Mr. Corbyn would have the public believe that he is a man of principle. Jeremy Corbyn, a man who spent his career in the division lobbies as a Eurosceptic, with our great heroes, Ian Duncan Smith, Bill Cash and John Redwood, voting against the European Union in his campaign for Remain. And now Corbyn's Surrender Act simply offers more confusion and delay at a cost of £250 million every week. This from the gentleman who has spent the last 2 years demanding an immediate general election, only now to run away from an election once it was offered to him as a model of Georgie Porgy, who you will remember, Georgie Porgy, Pudding and Pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. When the boys came out to play, Jeremy Corbyn ran away. He is a man who claims to have spent his entire career fighting racism, only to allow such virulent anti-Jewish racism to proliferate in the Labour Party that under his leadership, it has become the second party in this nation's history after the BNP to be formally investigated for racism. I do not believe that Jeremy Corbyn is a bad man, but he is a weak man, too weak to lead his party, certainly too weak to lead his country. And behind him there may be stronger men, like Sir Keir Starmer, poised as if Brutus, stiletto in hand, awaiting the moment to strike, Striking, of course, being something the left are quite fond of, the supposed mastermind of Labour's Brexit policy, whose much vaunted helmsmanship has steered the Labour Party into the implausible straits of claiming they want to negotiate a new deal with Brussels, then to campaign against it in a referendum to remain in the European Union. That is Labour logic for you. In friendship false, implacable in hate, resolved to ruin or to rule the state. Those words were from the time of Charles II, and I think they apply to the Labour Party now. But let us not forget the middle muddle, where we have Jo Swinson, Liberal Democrat by name, but not by nature. Liberal in accepting the yoke of Brussels, democratic perhaps only in her own mind as a figment of the imagination, because it is they who take the extreme position. They want to cancel Brexit entirely without giving the people a say. And then on the right, we have the in many ways admirable Nigel Faraj, who sent to Brussels, I think, the finest politician we have ever sent to the European Parliament, in the form of my sister. And I shall report back to Annunziata that she got an even better chair than Jeremy Corbyn at the Tory party conference. However, we must not delude ourselves into thinking that a vote for the Brexit party does anything other than increase the risk of Brexit being cancelled altogether. And then we have the Speaker. As a parliamentarian, no, listen, because I'm actually going to be nice about him. But wait. As a parliamentarian, I have been and in many ways remain a great admirer of the Speaker. He has helped MPs hold the government to account and to seek redress of grievance. But in my view, he has now flown too close to the sun. And I hope that as he comes to his retirement, he will not allow the good he has done in his earlier years to be forgotten. But his recent mistakes have, to my deepest regret as leader of the House of Commons, damaged the standing of the House in the eyes of the British public to its lowest point in modern history. So how can this impasse, created by Mr. Corbyn and friends who wish to cancel the referendum, be resolved? Well, it's simple. And this is a Tory party slogan that goes back to Lord Randolph Churchill. We must trust the people. The people have spoken. Ladies and gentlemen, you have spoken. We are not your leaders from on high, we are your servants. And it is our responsibility to do what you have willed. Parliament has promised to do it. Over 80% of members of Parliament were elected on a promise to respect the result. And the sovereignty of Parliament does not come out of a void, it comes to Parliament from the people. Yet this Parliament is now holding the people in contempt. Ladies and gentlemen, they are holding you in contempt. So we must have a general election. It is time for a new Parliament. A new egg must be laid that is not addled as this one is. We must trust the people as our opponents do not. And it is only a Conservative government led by our fantastic Prime Minister that can get Brexit done and deliver on the people's genuine priorities, because Brexit is a means to an end, not an end in itself. So boosting the NHS, providing more police on the streets, creating more good school places, and cutting the cost of living. So let me conclude as I started with Disraeli. Disraeli set out the glorious balance of our Constitution. That balance has been disturbed, distorted, and displaced. And it is our responsibility to restore that balance once more. And that will be done through a general election, through the good sense of our masters, the British people.
Thank you very much, Jacob. The next most popular question actually really doesn't have your name written on it. I think you would be in the best position to answer this. This question is, I believe Boris and team will get a good deal from the EU, but how will we get a majority in Parliament to vote for it?
It is a very important question, but I think the mood has changed in the country at large, that everybody now wants to leave and start talking about other things. And I think that's true in the House of Commons as well. And I think if the DUP are happy with the deal, there'll be very few Conservatives, including those who are without the whip, who are then against a deal. And at that point, there are a number of people in other parties who think that, yes, we must now just finish this. You're all great Brexiteers. You've got the fantastic posters to hold up. Thank you very much. Who here wants to stop talking about Brexit and talk about other things after 31st of October? Hands up. Well, even if I were chairman of the Labour Party conference, that motion was carried.
I'm a little bit, sorry, but I'm a little bit conscious of the time we have left. So if Michael or Steve have nothing burning to add to that in response to that question, please may I now ask the Right Honourable Steve Barclay to address the audience.
Delaying Brexit has come at a cost. It has cost us trust in our democracy. For those who, in good faith, at the last general election, believed the promises of members of Parliament who said they would honour our vote to leave the EU. And it has a massive financial cost. In extra payments to the EU, it costs an extra £1 billion a month for every month that we delay. And how much has the delay cost in lost opportunities? The very opportunities which we voted for to lower living costs by forging new trade deals around the world. With so much delay, is it any wonder my good friend Jacob has taken to lying down on the government front bench? But there has been one immediate cost from delaying Brexit. The prolonged uncertainty has caused worry and concern to over 3 million EU citizens living in our country. For those EU citizens living here, I have a direct message today. You are not part of the negotiation. Your life and livelihood in the UK is not in doubt. Now, the Prime Minister set this out in the first hour in office on the steps of Downing Street. He made it clear that we want those citizens to stay. We're proud that they have chosen to bring up their families in our communities, to work in our public services and in our businesses, in our NHS, where there are over 700 more EU doctors today than at the time of the referendum. We value the contribution you make to our country and are pleased that you have chosen to make your home here. We have guaranteed your rights to live, work and stay in the UK with full citizens' rights for as long as you choose. Now it is time for the EU to match that guarantee. Now, I'm sure, conference, I'm not alone in being familiar with the refrain, despite Brexit. Yet despite Brexit, we have record low unemployment and the highest inward investment of any country in Europe, despite Brexit. Just last week, London overtook New York to become the #1 city for investment in fintech. And despite Brexit, Jaguar Land Rover has just opened a state-of-the-art car design centre, delivering a £500 million vote of confidence in Britain. It's time to stop apologising for Brexit and unleash the opportunities it offers. We can source products that we do not produce at a better price. Too often, the EU restricts access to markets that we want to trade with, like the foods we do not grow in the UK, or the products we do not specialise in producing. With new trade deals with other countries, we can help the developing world through trade, rather than handing out aid. To empower countries through free trade is the essence of being conservative, and an important part of why I am a Brexiteer. To use Brexit as a catalyst for change across all parts of the United Kingdom, including areas like my own in the Fens, who see Brexit as an opportunity, not a problem to be solved. Now, Jeremy Corbyn parades his credentials as an animal rights campaigner, but his delay prevents our sovereign choice on the continued live animal exports. He claims to care about the planet, yet his delay to Brexit means we can't choose to remove VAT on environmental products like solar panels. His delay prevents us from implementing a new agriculture bill designed for our British farmers, not those of the French. And delay also means less time to focus on our priorities. It's the Conservatives who want to get Brexit done so that we can focus on what people really want to see. The biggest increase in spending on the NHS, tackling crime through the extra 20,000 police officers, and levelling up opportunity, including on school funding. And delay puts our United Kingdom at risk, encouraging the Scottish nationalists that if one referendum can be ignored, then so too can the 2014 referendum on the integrity of the UK itself. We will defend the Union because we are the Conservative and Unionist Party. And what do Labour want to have more delay on Brexit for? They cannot even count the vote at their conference on what they want to do. And Diane Abbott wasn't even doing the counting. Remain, sit on the fence, keep it a secret until after the election. Labour don't trust the people, and that is why the people cannot trust them. Labour ignore the votes of the many because they prefer to listen to the opinions of the North London few. Now, their position is to negotiate Brexit and then to scrap it. Now, that would demolish the UK's negotiating position. And what would they do once they had negotiated this fantasy Brexit deal? Well, the Shadow Foreign Secretary told us. She made it clear. They would bring it back and have an unwanted, divisive second referendum where they would vote and campaign to remain against their own deal. Labour's Brexit policy can be summed up in 3 words: dither and delay. And look at the so-called Liberal Democrats. They want to revoke Article 50 without even letting you have a say. Now, the Liberal Democrat position is now so extreme, it's even been rejected by the Green Party. The Irish Deputy Prime Minister said on Wednesday that there are solutions to this, but it is a matter of political will. Well, I agree. The Commission has said that it's open to creative and flexible solutions on the border in Northern Ireland. I am too. President Juncker has said he's not wedded to the backstop, nor are we, so let's abolish it. The Prime Minister and I are focused on negotiating a deal, but if we can't get a deal, we'll leave on the 31st of October anyway. Michel Barnier once said, the clock is ticking. For Jeremy Corbyn, the election clock is now ticking very loudly. Our communities should not have to pay millions for each further hour of his delay. We as Conservatives know that it's your money that he would waste. We need to get Brexit done. And with this Prime Minister, we will.
Thank you so much, Steve. We are dangerously running out of time, so I don't think we will have very much time for too many other questions. But I just thought I will leave with something that sounds a little bit like a mischievous question. And do please keep your answers short. And the question is, do you think other countries will leave the EU after Britain does? Michael, you haven't been saying anything for a long time.
I don't think so. The American baseball coach, Yogi Berra, said never make predictions, especially about the future. I think that there are particular reasons why Britain was right to leave the European Union at this time, and I respect the right of other nations to forge their own future. So my own hunch is that Britain will leave, other countries will stay, but 10, 15, 20 years on, I think we may see a very different European Union from the one we have now.
Jacob?
Well, they would if they got any sense, wouldn't they? I mean, but that's not a forecast. I mean, I think the problems with the euro are so deep-seated that the current euro project, European Union project, can't last long into the future, but things often last longer than one anticipates.
Steve?
I think it goes back to, if you look at things like a speech by de Gaulle in '67, how the UK went in. I think it's always been the case that our relationship has been different. I think that is what's reflected there. And I think the euro will require Europe to integrate more rather than less. And I think that's the direction of travel that many of us as supporters of Leave saw. And that was a big part in why we wanted to assert our democracy, because we recognise that Europe may well need to integrate further. We respect their wish to do so. We just don't want to be part of that.
Michael, Jacob and Steve, thank you so much. That was wonderful. And thank you so much for being here today, ladies and gentlemen. Please give a round of applause to our wonderful panel.